One of the reasons everyone's here is that you're storytellers to begin with. We've been talking about storytelling the whole time. Kind of a obvious point that at the end of the day, storytelling is going to be about the only competitive advantage you're going to have. But how you propagate a story, how you co-evolve a story, how you monetize that story, well, that's basically all up for grabs. And one of the things that I submit that the reason it's up for grabs is that there has been a loosening between media and the medium. I mean, for example, writing a 30-minute sitcom for print doesn't really work. It was a form that was developed along with television. You know, above-the-fold placements of advertising and news tended to come about because that was some of the atomic nature of newsprint. Well, now, effectively speaking, we can be as tight or as loose between the media and the medium as we want. And one of the things that I firmly believe is that this kind of choice is what people are finding the most scary. So, whoops. Let's consider a transmedia franchise. This is kind of the granddaddy of all of them. A non-exhaustive list outside of television that we can have is web clips, summaries, behind-the-scenes documentaries, mock news reports, polls, quizzes, console games, online games, mobile games. I had to keep this one. Interactive graphic novels, comics, text updates, fake websites, blogs, Facebook pages. And that's the non-exhaustive list. I would argue that one of the things that Tim Kring and Brent are doing is not just simply seeing how many different channels can we throw this story onto. It's a very real switch from the value of storytelling coming from how many copies can you pump out to how can I use these mediums to create a world where people can dwell, where people can connect, and where people can interact. Because if I can hit those three cylinders, basically the ability to monetize doesn't follow directly, but it's definitely in the ballpark. And going forward, and one of the reasons why I quit my job as a industry analyst 2 years ago to concentrate full-time on cloud computing is I think the next evolution of storytelling is where we bundle data and we bundle functionality directly with narrative. That effectively speaking, stories are going to behave differently, not just display differently, depending on the context of the audience, depending on the goals of the storyteller, depending on maybe the goals of the advertiser. Now, spoiler alert, it took me a while, but I did manage to capture a picture of a real computing cloud. No value chain chevrons, no nice little drawing. I mean, one reason cloud computing is so hot right now is that any idiot can draw a cloud. Look how many have. But this, in the long run, is a computing cloud. That's it. It's a big-ass, stonking data center. When you upload your picture to Flickr, when you tweet, hopefully not in the corner, when you update your Facebook profiles, when you're doing all this stuff, checking your Gmail, it eventually comes back to something like this. Now, for public clouds, you can count the number of companies on hands and still have fingers left over who can offer a public cloud to people. Because, true, under all this mess, which is not only about servers and about bits, but it's mainly about air conditioning. And there is a reason why you've got all these data centers locating on the Columbia River. This is hard stuff. But the nice news is that at a certain level, you don't need to care. Because effectively speaking, this is FedEx for bits. And this is the way you should look at it. As media providers, you need to look at this as FedEx. You fill out a fairly simple interface, which is the FedEx card. And they make you a guarantee. They don't talk about how many planes it's going to get on. They don't talk about all the wonderful assembly lines it goes through. They just say 10:30 tomorrow this price, or 2 days later this price. And that's what you should learn about. And as the funny thing happens, as more bits, as more profiles, as more media gets on there, new things start emerging. Let's take that example of FedEx, the physical FedEx. Do you think eBay would make sense without FedEx or UPS? Could Amazon operate without them? More likely not. And that's why cloud computing, I do believe, is going to be important for journalists. Not that you need to be learning about multi-tenancy and metadata and infrastructures of service and platform as a service and all your data. Sure, you're going to need to deal with that, but probably deal with that through an expert on staff or an expert service provider. And at the same time, however, these emergent phenomena, as more people start to put their transmedia stories on these, and as they start to open up new business models, that's what's going to make things special. So I think there's three forces that are causing more of the media business going to be pumped up into these clouds. First one's gadgets, which we're just exploding with. I don't know who's ever been to the Consumer Electronics Show, but now everything groans. It groans with network consumer electronic devices. All kinds of different things. I mean, yeah, it's true. We finally got to that horrible stage where, our refrigerator is, hooked up to the internet. But more importantly, we start talking about screens. And screens mean bit rates, and screens mean frame rates, and screens mean resolution rates, and such. And from your point of view, if you had to build the whole enchilada under your own house, you probably could never get into media. I was talking with Sam over at lunch. In 1955, Chairman Mao had the Great Leap Forward, where he had people smelting iron in their backyard to try to make China into an industrial power. Well, we've been smelting bits in our backyards and in our basement service for a long time until network services came about. So as we get into Google TVs, network Kindles, iPads especially, let's take a look at how that's changing industry dynamics. The big story now, Apple has surpassed Microsoft in market cap, and you have a company that's done that based on the triangulation of product design, media, and mobility. Now, how that's going to turn out, there's still some things to happen. But just by the very plethora and explosion of different kinds of gadgets that are networked and can accept media, you're going to start dealing with infrastructures that are going to be more cloud-based. And the second one, which is even more important, is the aspect of mobility. Now, Cisco introduced or published its last visual networking index, which, you want to start playing with numbers. That's a fun one to do. Effectively speaking, mobile bandwidth increased in 2009 160% worldwide versus 2008 to reach 90 petabytes a month. That's about 23 million DVDs worth of information that is going through radio waves. A lot of it might be email, a lot of it might be text. More and more of it is becoming video. Your iPad, George, which is now probably pulling in video, is pulling in video not because you took a serial cord and plugged it into the jack. It's got a Wi-Fi antenna, it's got a 3G. So one of the things that you're going to be dealing with effectively as storytellers is that 8-foot experience. Okay, and I can see a few of us out here who remember All in the Family. You know how Archie used to structure his day so that he could have Cronkite, in front of him. It was part of Archie's day. That audience is dying out. The audience that you're really going to be reaching is probably going to be experiencing your content in more and more of a mobile context. And then lastly, the third force, aside from devices and mobility, is this, it's not the nerd aspect, it's the multi-personality. We're all Eve. You remember that movie All About Eve, where she had multi-personalities and multitasking? Multitasking is going to be the norm. Kaiser Foundation in January of this year put out a study which was showing that 8 to 18-year-olds, when you count it all up, are averaging about 7 hours, 38 minutes daily exposure to media. But when you count in multitasking, which is looking at your Mac while you're watching TV and listening to the stereo and answering text messages, that actually bumped the effective figure up to 10 hours and 45 minutes of media per day for this particular audience. Two things I would say follow from that. The first one is this idea of being offline has to be conscious now. How do you tell yourself? I'm consciously going off the grid. It used to be, I'm consciously going to log in. You remember how they used to, in the 90s, tell you about logging in? Now it's, I'm off the grid. Screens and media effectively are following us, and we're tourists. but they're definitely following our kids. It's as ambient as electricity, so long as you're, in the triad economies. You go to different countries, maybe there's going to be an emphasis more on the mobile side. But the fact of the matter is that in a similar way to where, yeah, we feel inconvenience, but we have an idea that we can get electricity when we pretty much need it, except when there's a blackout. Similar things are happening with the ability of interactivity in media. So with that, let's start looking at cloud specific. I love this movie, by the way. As we go further, one of the things to start looking at cloud infrastructures is not just simply the fact that it's cheaper bits that we can move around, but it gives us a new platform for innovation, one of which is to make video streams more clickable. And by clickable, I don't mean clicking on the little blue link. I'm talking about in-stream overlays where I can start highlighting targets. And these targets, I'm having to use the, kind of a metaphorical sense. But the target might be that I'm watching this and I'm really taken by a particular shirt, dress, or hat worn by a character. I can now highlight that. And not only highlight that, but discover it through different types of targets, through keywords, through little things that start to, in a similar way that you can mouse over different aspects of a web page, and some will come out to you and some will fade in. You can start to do that with streaming video. But those link out to the products and services and transactions that is going to happen. So whereas previously we programmed a lot of our content around content plus ad pod, plus content again, plus ad pod, plus content again, and that kind of linear chain, I submit that future editorial programming, and by programming I'm talking about the setup, leave the X factor, story to the side, but just the programming part, is going to be almost as much dominated by how do I populate this video stream with targets, how do I make those targets discoverable by the audience, how do I link those discoverable targets to the types of either marketing or services or content that I want. And in that sense, the only way to cost effectively manage that innovation problem right now is basically on cloud infrastructure. But cloud is more than just how can I make things creative. Cloud is also the commercialization platform, media providers and airlines have a similar inventory and supply chain management problem always, whether it's butts on a seat or ad impressions. It's a similar type of pricing and distribution challenge. You got an asset that changes its value and people's willingness to pay over time, and at the same time, once the impression is served and once the plane takes off, the price of the value of the asset, that particular asset, goes to zero. So, the savvy operators in both media and transportation have always wanted to kind of do the same thing. They want to take raw data in the form, it might be ticket searches, it might be searches on keywords, and then they want to enhance that with other data, which might come from a third-party source, and then pump that into an analytics package, which might give them an idea of what its general worth is. And then they want to take the information from that analytics package and turn it into the insight, where they say, that's the price that we want, and that's the strategy we want to pursue for this particular property, and then turn that insight into a workflow. That's a pretty straightforward process, which technically speaking requires a shitload of data and processing and resources. Through the 90s and in the 2000s, we knew what we wanted to do. We just couldn't do it cost effectively. Now you have companies like YieldX, Peer39, MediaMath, some of these quantitative refugees from Wall Street. So, understand their background when they start talking to you about trading media like trading stocks. But it's more or less the same thing. If I've got X number of potential impressions, or let's get away from the theory. Let's say I got 18 to 34 males, West Coast, who are interested in sports. I got one marketer who wants to buy 18 to 34s. I got another one that wants to get exposed to young, that was coming out wrong. I want another one that wants to reach young males. I've got a third one that says I want to buy West Coast. That's all in the same content. How do I sell that? How do I sell that effectively? And so effectively, how do I take X impressions, which are expiring at Y rate, in the context of Z demand, by marketers and optimize what I'm selling. It goes to reason that unless you have some pretty serious processing firepower that you can call on demand, you're leaving a lot of performance and a lot of money on the table. And that's one of the final reasons why cloud is going to be important to the media industry, is because it is enabling kind of dynamic pricing as things go forward, and that is changing how people are going to be doing their negotiations. It is still a very ugly process. Okay, and if you think that you had a deer in the headlights look in the newsroom, you ain't seen nothing compared to sales. These people are, they're like, I don't know how to fill in a spreadsheet. All I know how to do is drink at lunch with my contact. That's how I sold media for years. And then they'll always do business always comes down to human interaction. They're entirely right. But the difference is that there's humans on each side now who are coming armed with data. So it is very true. Don't let the stuff. I used to torture numbers for a living. You can make them say anything. At the same time, those with data right now have got a bit of momentum. So just to wind up a bit, cloud computing does enable you to take your story-based world, and let's imagine that you caught lightning in a bottle. Previously, your business model was to pump out as many copies as you could, or to get as many exposures to different people as you could to sell advertising against it. Pretty straightforward. But now, let's think about a world where you have more dynamic pricing. In video alone, we're going to be looking at about a 10 to 30x increase in the number of video streams that are being served. And if you look at, I think the latest data is coming from Bright Cove and TubeMogul, Q1 2010 worldwide, about 400 million streams over 3 months. I think that's right. No, that's 400 million players, about 2 billion streams, 2 billion streams, Q1 2010. And at the same time, we're only looking at about a 2 to 3x increase in the number of video viewers. And that's an important thing, because it used to be you sold video based on who was exposed to it. Now you're going to have to sell video based on what did people do with it. And dynamic pricing is going to be part of the score. So whether a stream prices for 2 cents or 5 cents is going to be determined by the audience, the target user, what their particular context is, what their device is, and everyone's going to have access to roughly the same kind of ad inventory, but it's going to be those who have the ability to move fastest, unfortunately, who have some of the capability to act like they're dealing stocks. They're going to be the ones that are making the cream out of the last 15%. So I would close by calling cloud computing more of a silver buckshot rather than a silver bullet solution. And I firmly believe that as journalists, it is important for you to become literate into what are some of the basic forces that are changing this industry. But don't look to cloud computing as a specific rifle shot. It is definitely more of a shotgun approach. And that's not always a bad thing. And finally, if you do want to get into multi-tenancy and metadata and infrastructure and virtualization and all that geeky stuff that gets people hot and sweaty, go to this is the site. It's published under Creative Commons. It's my content calling card. And I thank you very much for your time.